Wait, hold up. Before you click the dislike button, just take a moment to breathe. Maybe one more breath. Relax. We're going to find our inner peace, and we're going to try to sit down today and have a conversation like adults. I didn't even want to make this video today. I wanted to. I actually had a cute, like, funny video where I was shooting Pilo rocket launchers and throwing thermites and throwing knives at people in a live commentary in Warzone, with the idea being that I had seen the news and I knew how bad it was, and I wanted to create some, like, distracting, nice, and friendly gaming content for everybody. But the news is getting so bad and so extreme that I feel that it is my duty, the ethical and moral duty of me as a citizen, to use this voice and this platform and following that I have for something more positive. While it's true that I am an evil, greedy snake of a YouTuber whose primary goal in life is to make more money off of YouTube, I also have a side of me that feels that I need to do something good with this channel, something that gives back to the community and provides some greater service to the world around me outside of just servicing myself. And usually that's videos, educational videos, or topics where people can learn things, explore critical thinking. And in the case of today, it's exploring current events from an analytical point of view. I almost said standpoint there. So unlike a lot of the really inflammatory clickbait that you're going to see all over the internet today, we're going to try to have a real adult conversation here. And we have 5 topics that I want to cover. Number 1 is the Black Lives Matter movement itself. Number 2 is George Floyd specifically. And then a lot of that's going to tie into right to jury trial and some of the issues that we have with police and jury trials. The protest, including their violent aspects. I do not condone violence. I condemn it. And I have a lot of criticisms for the violent protests, the police response to said violent protests, for which I also have criticisms, and finally some proposed solutions. We have a lot to talk about today, and let's start with the most simple, straightforward one, which is the title and thumbnail of the video, which is Black Lives Matter. I support Black Lives Matter because I believe that Black Lives Matter. I think that's like an objectively true statement that Black lives do matter. And I know that's an inflammatory one these days. And right now, immediately in the comments, it's going to be, I can't believe you said that. White lives matter. Blue lives matter. There was another one that wasn't a lives matter, but it was like, it's okay to be white a while back. That was kind of because like BLM and other stuff had some more radical sectors that were getting kind of nasty anti-white. So 4chan started this It's Okay to Be White campaign. And all of those things are true. It's okay to be white. It's okay to be Casper the Ghost White like me, living in the suburbs, looking like a fuckboy. It's okay to be black. It is okay to be almost anything. These things are true. All lives do matter. Yes, they do, including black ones. But the reason that we have a movement called Black Lives Matter is that the black community does not feel or believe that their lives matter. They feel that they are excluded from that all lives matter bubble, and that what happens is when people say all lives matter, what they mean is all lives matter with an asterisk, and then you read at the bottom and it says, well, but black lives matter a lot less, and in maybe some cases not at all. Black Lives Matter as a movement just wants to get black people to be considered living, breathing human beings worthy of constitutional rights, and I would have hoped that was a thing that was already real, but it's not in a lot of cases. And I am literally a walking perfect example of this. The liberal cuck that you see here before you today making a Black Lives Matter video is not always the man that I was. I was born and raised in a very deeply divided, racially segregated part of the South. I went to an all-white school. I lived in all-white church, all-white neighborhood in a town that was like 75% black. It was like apartheid almost. It was insane. My parents and grandparents that raised me were extraordinarily racist. As a child, and I do mean as a very young child, I was taught that black people are inhuman. And I do mean that they are literally subhuman. They are not worth breathing. They are monkeys. They are animals. They should have been grateful to be slaves. We educated them, and now look how they treat us, and they're only good for working, or maybe only 1 in 50 of them is worth breathing. The rest of them, you just have to beat them and corral them into a line. I was taught that black people exist only because in the Bible, after Cain killed his brother, God marked Cain so that he would be hated and despised until his very days, and that the mark of Cain was turning his skin black. That was the mark, so that all black people were descendants of murderers. I've been taught that it's better to kill all of them, that we should have a different justice system for them, that they should just skip jury trials and we should just go hang them if they break the laws. I knew Klan members growing up. I knew people involved in white supremacist stuff. And I'm going to let you know that when you grow up in an environment like this, it changes you. You can't be better than your environment. Imagine growing up somewhere where you're taught every day that black people are the worst things to happen to the planet since like ever, basically. And also in that town that you're in is so bitterly divided that you pretty much can't talk or interact with black people before things do get violent because it's that ridiculous there. And I was not better than my environment. I picked up a great number of racist beliefs, really quite nasty ones in a lot of ways too. As just some random examples, when I started going to school, I was taught to use the word African American instead of just the N-word. When I used the word African American at home, I was punished for it, called an N-word lover, and it was a very hot button issue in my house. However, when I would call people the N-word, I would just be rewarded with candy or praise or whatever. That's how I was raised. That's what little Drifty grew up knowing. And I did quite a few things that I am not particularly proud of. Things that, had video cameras and cell phones been around in the early 90s, you probably would not follow me or think much of me as a person today. I remove myself from that environment. I meet new people, including a lot of black people, new friends, learn new things, get access to the internet and keep learning and change as a person, but that didn't come overnight. It took quite a long time actually, and quite a lot of experiences and a couple of ass kickings too. Yeah, that happened too. But the reality is, and the reason I say that is that I am a walking example of the fact that there are still places and people that are taught that black lives do not matter. And I don't think that experience is true of the majority of Americans, and I don't even think that it's true for the majority of white Americans, but there is a significantly sized subgroup, a nasty streak, you could say, that do still teach these things to this day. And if I still go visit some of my family members, if I were to just call them up today and put them on speakerphone here, my God, you would hear some colorful things. More than just being like directly taught that, because I don't think there's quite so much of that anymore. It's the generational influence. Let's say that like your parents were Nazis, literally, or something. That's an easy example. It's a little extreme. But they have to hide themselves. They have to conceal themselves. And even they're so paranoid about being found out, they can't teach this kind of ideology to their children, but they will teach it in other ways. The children will observe them. They'll learn. They'll hear little comments and kind of pick up off after their parents, and that even subconscious influence will carry on to the next generation. It also finds its way into print, art, film media, almost any sort of media that you can imagine. It will find its way into that because media, it's a pretty big topic, a pretty big spectrum of things, and it's created by all types of people, good, bad, left, right, ugly, whatever. And you do put your own beliefs in it in some capacity, and some people hold those beliefs and it makes it into media and it influences other people decades later. And it carries on for a very, very long time and ultimately conditions us to not make the most rational decisions when it comes to races and race violence and things like that, which is the problem I believe that we're facing here in America. So that's why I'm pro Black Lives Matter. Because after quite a long time of learning experiences, I have learned that black lives do matter. Yes, they are real people and they should be respected. And I think most of you here would agree with that. Now let's move on to the next topic today, which is the murder of George Floyd. And then we're going to talk about probably like a little bit of that, and then like a lot about the right to a jury trial. So George Floyd was murdered. That there's really no way around it. When you have 4 people sitting on the most vital points of your body, including one with your head cricked sideways and knee on the neck, you die. You can't breathe. Even if you can breathe, sometimes it can close off arteries and you can cause brain damage. In most police training classes, they specifically train people to never do that because it kills the suspect that they have in custody. The officers decided to do that anyway. There was many of them watching. They ignored all the pleas from the man himself who was suffocating and the pleas from the people on the street and got increasingly hostile. And I wish I could say that that was an uncommon occurrence in the United States, but it's not. Just a week or two before, we had the Arbery guy who was shot by 2 rednecks with shotguns in the back of a truck because he failed to obey simple orders from people that were not police, but they were former police, and then they were not charged until there were riots. And then just after that, there was a lady whose name I forget. She was, I want to say, an EMT, and her husband was a nurse or another essential worker. Police got a warrant to search for a different person. They went to the wrong address and did a plainclothes, no-knock warrant at 3 a.m. And the husband panicked and pulled a gun and started shooting at the police, who then returned fire, killed the woman, injured him, and he picked up like 5 felony assault on a police officer charges, which is, as black people, of course, which is ridiculous, because imagine you being at home in the middle of the night, minding your own damn business and being asleep, and the next thing you hear is the door just smashes down and there's people running in your house with guns. I'm gonna start blasting. That's why I'm terrified here where I live of being swatted, because I know if somebody kicks down my door at 3 in the morning, I'm gonna start shooting. And the fucked up thing about that is, I'm not a big fan of no-knock warrants, just in general, is that they also decided to charge the only survivor of this incident with multiple counts of assault and felony murder. And the dude's still in jail right now, as far as I'm aware. I don't think he could even post bond, it was so high. So the police kicked down the door, killed his wife, injured him, and then just said, let's just put him in jail for a while. And then that's fucked up, which leads into the next topic on George Floyd and all this, is that we have a major issue in the United States with police accountability, because the systems that apply to us as regular citizens do not apply to police equally. And what you see over and over and over again is that police commit crimes and break laws that would land any of us, black or white and suburban as me, in jail for years, decades, life. And they get little to no punishment, if any punishment, and they still get to be employed as police officers. You see this over and over and over again. Even the guy that killed George Floyd, I want to say he had something like 5 violent incidences over the last 15 years or so that should have gotten almost anybody fired, but he's still employed and never got punished. And I think that what I'm about to discuss next is by far the most important part of this video. It's sad that it has to come so late in because of how it's structured, but what's wrong with this situation is that police do not get punished for their actions the same way that we do, because the system is in their favor. So as an example, let's say that I went out on the street and shot somebody. Matter of fact, some of you might be aware that there was a incident here at home at my house recently that had the potential for violence, and I was armed and I had the opportunity to take a life. If I had done that, which I'm glad that I didn't, I'm glad that things panned out differently, that I would have been arrested, yes. The police would have listened and recorded and written down every single thing that I said to use against me in a court of law. When I got to the court of law, I would have met a judge that I have never met before in my life, probably don't even know anything about. I would be dealing with the district attorney and his assistant prosecutors, whose jobs are by definition to get the most convictions possible. Their job as a prosecutor is to prosecute, and the city job, the one that I'm paying taxes for, using that tax dollars of mine to pay this guy to prosecute me and put me in jail. And then I'm going to go to court, and the police officers are going to offer their testimony on the situation. In many cases, it's not preferable to the defendant. And then a jury that has never seen me before and doesn't have any real bias against me is going to decide. And I'll say that with a little asterisk. Juries are kind of the wild card in all of this. Juries always have bias for rich, for poor, for race, for education, for face tattoos, and just age, sex, gender, a plethora of things. But if you look at it big picture, juries are pretty impartial. But let's say that the situation here at home had gone differently, and the police had showed up and they just didn't like what was happening, and they just shot the other person or shot me. Okay, we'll just say that they just, for whatever reason, they're like, this guy's a fucking cuck, let's just shoot him, and I got blasted. What would then happen is that likely the police officers would not be initially arrested like the rest of us. You would find it difficult for fellow police officers, not just the ones with them, but then the ones that would eventually do the arrest and first responders. They would be reluctant to testify against their own, because police are ultimately in a sort of, it's them against the public or them versus criminals, so they kind of stick together like a brotherhood, and we're going to talk about police unions in a little bit. You'll find that detectives that we didn't mention before would probably be less willing to really put a lot of work into cops, and it gets especially bad when we start talking about district attorneys and prosecutors, because prosecutors cannot effectively prosecute without the assistance of the police. If a police officer goes to court, he's going to know the prosecutor and the prosecuting attorney by name in most cases, in all but maybe the very biggest of cities. And they've probably worked together before. They probably have some rapport with each other. And the prosecutor is forced to work and cooperate and get support from the police force. Because if the police stop arresting, if they stop offering their testimony, if they start cooperating with the prosecutor, he's never going to be able to prosecute anybody, and he's going to lose his job, and he's going to go under. There's a similar but less extreme story with judges, in that the police probably know the judges by name. They've probably been to the court many times. They've met, they've talked, they're in and around the courthouse. They both do public service work. So, and then finally, when we hit juries, this is where it gets a little bit crazy, because juries and thus people in general have an implicit bias in favor of authority figures, and especially first responders. So if I go to, for a different reason, like if I went to court and it was my word versus like some cop's word, the police are going to be believed much, much more by the jury and by the judge in most cases. So the police start off with some, what's the right word, some little extra leg up on the jury. So when I go to court, it's all anonymous, and pretty much all the cards are stacked against me except the judge and jury. They're supposed to be pretty impartial. But when a police officer goes to court, then they have the judge on their side, the district attorney on their side, the investigating and arresting officers on their side, and a leg up on the jury. So it's extremely difficult to arrest and prosecute an officer and get the same kind of convictions that you would on a regular citizen like, say, me. If you want to sprinkle in some influence of police unions, you'll find that unions might tell officers to support the bad one, or it could be difficult to fire them, or the union could threaten a strike, or police unions are extremely influential and they do protect their own. You find that it's, again, incredibly difficult to force accountability on police at the same level of average citizens. And what that creates is a system of no accountability, where if you are a cop, you can get away with actual crimes and bad things that other citizens cannot. And this is not a direct criticism on police officers, because I have to be very careful about that on YouTube. I'll get demonetized. But there's a ton of police officers, thousands, tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of police officers who live in the United States. It's a very, very big, broad, and diverse group. And you run into something called the big numbers problem. It doesn't matter what system you put in place, what hiring methods you have, what background checks you have, or what you try to do. When you hire 100,000 people, you're going to have some bad eggs. Just naturally. You can look at YouTubers, there's good ones and bad ones. You can look at doctors, good ones and bad ones. You can look at anything that has enough of them, and there's going to be good and bad, right? Even fans of mine, most of you are fantastic people. Some of you are horrible, miserable cretins, and I know that. Some of you are crazy. Some of you are in any number of things when you get a bunch of people. And the issue with our system is that with no accountability, the small section of bad apples or bad actors can kind of do whatever they want, and they end up being protected by the rest, which I think is screwed up. So one of the problems that we have in America and have had for a long time, that I think the Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd movement is moving up to the forefront, is that the systems that apply to citizens are not the same ones that apply to people in positions of power, that they are unfair. But it also hits a very difficult point where it's like, okay, well, if jury trials are unfair for cops, then what should we do? Because we're supposed to have one system of justice for all. And overall, I do really like our court and trial system. And the way that we do things here in America is fairer and better than just about anywhere else I can think of off the top of my head in the world. So it would seem not only grossly unconstitutional, but unethical for me to come out and say, well, cops don't need jury trials, because kind of the argument for the pro-George Floyd killing argument is that criminals don't need jury trials, that criminals should just be killed. We just skip all that trouble and get rid of that. But a jury trial is one of the fundamental rights that you have as a citizen that protects all of the other rights, that you can't be punished by the government unless your peers also sign off on this punishment. So I don't want to take that away from police officers. So you can't upend the entire justice system for a certain subsection of people, otherwise nobody would do that. The best solution that I've heard to this problem was actually a Bernie Sanders one. I know I just got about 500 more dislikes right there, but he had this plan to create a new department in the Department of Justice, if I'm remembering this correctly. Not a new agency, but like a new little division. And all they did is review police homicides or deaths. If you died in police custody, were shot by police, or you had a certain level of report or claim of violence that was high enough, that all of those are federal crimes, right? Like, yes, they're state crimes, but they're also federal crimes. So the federal government does have the authority to investigate, which was something they were doing with George Floyd with the FBI. And it might have been a department with the FBI. But anyway, anytime somebody dies in police custody, there's a federal agency that just immediately gets a warrant, gets subpoenas, gets the cameras, the facts, the info, and they investigate and determine if any actions need to be taken. And in doing this, if, say, an officer did kill people, like the guy that killed George Floyd, and the state of Minnesota is just like, you know what, we just don't care, not our problem, then the federal government could take a look and be like, this is pretty egregious, we do care, and it is a problem, and we're going to prosecute this guy in federal court. Federal courts, you'll be pulling jurors in from multiple states, you'll have an entirely different structure and type of judge, and the people involved won't have any implicit bias toward the officers or toward the local authority figures in the state, and the DA and the judge and all that won't have any personal ties to the cops. And I think that was the best overall system. It adds more federal government control and oversight, which I know like a lot of people aren't fan, like a lot of people like small government stuff. But in this case, it's like a safety net to kind of catch some of the bad things that are going unpunished, and that's the one that I would support. The right to a trial by jury, no matter how heinous your crime, no matter how evil you are, no matter how clear the guilt is the best safeguard that we have against tyranny, or one of the best. I know people have different opinions on that, but it's an extremely important safeguard that we have, and police should not be judge, jury, and executioner on the street. There's a lot of people that have been pro just kill all the looters, but we're supposed to be detaining people and giving them fair trials in all but the most extreme circumstances where lethal force is necessary to protect lives. A system where this is not true is in the Judge Dredd universe. It got so bad that the judges themselves are police officers and juries and executioners all on the street. And the movies and the comics, more recently, some people don't quite get them. They kind of look up to Judge Dredd as like a hero, as like a lone man standing against crime. But it was originally created as an anti-fascist parody of a system where a person who has extreme mental, social, emotional problems is given near unlimited power to punish people as he sees fit, and does exactly that. In the case of Judge Dredd, he follows the letter of the law, but to the maximum degree as often as possible, because he gets pleasure from killing these people. And it's supposed to be a criticism of those kinds of systems, and I promise you that's not the kind of system you want to live under. Okay, let's move on. We've talked about this for a long time. Let's talk about protests. I do not support violent protest. I will not ever say that it's a good thing to burn buildings down, or loot businesses, or kill people, or throw Molotovs, or piss, or any of that kind of stuff. Violent protest, bad. Not in support. The number one reason is it's criminal, costs lives, property damage, destruction. It prompts a greater response of force from the police. And also, I generally believe it's counterproductive. Let's say, you're protesting any issue, and you're protesting it because whoever's on the other side of the issue doesn't want to listen to you. And you say, okay, well, I'm just going to set everything on fire. The people on the other side are going to move further to their side and be like, well, fuck you. We're not burning anything. We're not the bad guys here. I don't have to listen to your shit. And I think that it's just super counterproductive. You'll never convince anybody to join your side through burning or violence or fire, graffiti, or any of that kind of stuff. Peaceful protests, peaceful shows of force are the best way to go. And that's what I would encourage all the way. But on a different note, I understand why people are violent. I like up here, I don't feel it in here. I know it up here. People are getting violent and pissed off because the last 500 or so peaceful protests didn't do anything. I mean, people have been peacefully protesting for years and years and years and years. Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, marches, standing in front of highways, which is on a borderline on peaceful, disruptive, no doubt. But didn't do anything. Nothing changed. Nothing at all changed. So after peace for years and years and years, eventually people get pissed off and they're like, okay, violence. Let's try violence. Fuck it. We'll try something new. I don't support that, but I understand why it happened, and I'm not surprised. I'm also not surprised at how intense this is, primarily because of coronavirus. There are 40 million Americans that are recently unemployed. That's 40 million, I can't remember if it's new or total unemployed Americans, but that's not coming out of like the employment pool, but just out of the total population, which is insane. We have more in total and per capita unemployed Americans in the United States now than we did during the Great Depression. This is probably going to be considered historically the greatest depression that we have ever been in. I think that was another helicopter. People have not had jobs for months. They're running out of money. The government assistance that they've been getting is pitiful. We've talked about that here on this channel. They are, not only did they lose their jobs, they can't get other jobs. The government has decided that some jobs are not essential. We can't open, we can't allow it because of the disease, and those are decisions that I largely support. But it's gotten extreme, and it's not surprising that 40 million people that are unemployed, chronically unemployed, have no hope of employment in the future, don't have much savings, have no government assistance, and are largely from the working class, including a disproportionate amount of minorities that lost their jobs. When they see something like this, they're going to get violent. This is a boiling pot. This is a bomb ready to go off. This is somebody spilling gasoline all over the house while smoking. This was going to happen. This should not have been a surprise to anybody. If it wasn't for George Floyd, it would have been for something else, just entirely. People are pissed off in this country. On top of all the things that they've objectively lost, they've been forced to sit in their house and do nothing, to have the things that they enjoy taken away. What little money they have, they can't even spend on the things they want because bars and restaurants, and as you can tell clearly from this mess, hairstylists are closed. And it really disrupts people's lives. After months of this, and realizing many more months to come of this, people are pissed off. People are really pissed off, and they have nothing to lose. Like, so many people are facing homelessness right now. The prison at least keeps you warm, I guess. It's terrible to say that. I would think I'd just rather be homeless than be in prison. But there are people that think that way. And it got nasty. And I think it's going to get more nasty with time. We are in a, what's the right word? Trial. I forgot the right word. I was going to say an epoch or something, but this is like a testing point for America to see how we react, how we handle this situation, what we choose to do. And right now we're failing miserably. All sides are failing. We are not protesting peacefully. We are responding with extreme violence to peaceful and non-peaceful protests. We're not handling coronavirus or unemployment or systematic racism properly or honestly at all. We're failing in pretty much every single way that we can fail, so it's not a surprise that people are pissed off. It's not just a failure of policy, but a failure on the individual levels. There are police officers shooting rubber bullets or chalk rounds or tear gas or whatever at peaceful protesters. I've seen hundreds of videos on the cops of people. It's like some dude on his knees with his hands in the air, and they just shoot him. Just YOLO it, I guess. And then there are protesters that just turn violent and burn down businesses and kill people. And there's not only we have policy failures, we have individual failures all the way down, and it's getting ugly. Moving on to the response to this, I think the response has been poor. It probably was always going to be poor because authority and power tends to try to protect itself. But what you're seeing right now is probably going to be a fundamental shift in policing in America, depending on which side the nation ultimately chooses. Because for years and years, we've had an increase in militarization of the police. They have more advanced weaponry, more advanced tactics. They're equipped to deal with more advanced threats, cameras, security, all that kind of stuff. And police sentiment's at an all-time low. They're probably scared. If you're a riot cop right now, you should be. It could get nasty. But the response has been heavy-handed in many cities. I have seen people getting shot for no reason, people shot in their own homes, tear gassed, arrested, run over, all sorts of just endless crazy stuff of heavy-handedness. And one of the reasons that I actually made this video today is because, I'm gonna see if I can pull it up here. I just woke up this morning and looked at the news, and the first thing I see is President Trump saying that we're being too weak, that we need to be more heavy-handed. And I'm going to read some of the quotes here because I actually shared this article. Where is it at? Donald Trump criticized governors for being weak, demanded tougher crackdowns on burning and stealing. Trump spoke to governors on a video teleconference that included law enforcement officials saying we have to get much tougher, including deploying more National Guards, using riot control tactics that have never been used on civilians before, something we've never seen is the real quote. and tried to make flag burning illegal today, bypassing Congress and other stuff, but most people just ignored that. And that's not just that, it's easy to criticize Big Orange Man bad, but it's a similar kind of mindset on lower governmental levels like governors and cities and mayors and stuff like that. The people are protesting violence from authority. They are protesting police overreaction. They are protesting police violence. They are protesting the powers that be that allow this to continue to happen. And the powers that be are like, you know what? You know what would really sort this out? More violence. Yeah. I think if we crack down even harder and got tougher and meaner, that the people protesting the meanness would go away. No, I honestly, I think it's going to get even worse. I think that if people are protesting police violence and your solution is more aggressive police tactics, you're just going to get more protests, and it's going to get worse. I'm expecting this to get quite bad before it's over. God, we've talked about a lot today. In the final end of this video, I'm supposed to talk about solutions, and I can't say that I think that there are a lot of easy or clear-cut ones in order to solve this problem. Even if, say, the tough crackdowns work, let's say the federal government and state governments roll out the army, they shut this down hard style, they lock down cities, martial law, everybody gets shot, protests are done. That doesn't fix the problem. The problems with society and our systems are still going to be there, and there's just going to be another protest just as bad or worse in 5 years, 10, 15, just whenever the next time is right. We'll just do this exact same thing again. So I don't think violence is the solution to this. I think diplomacy is the solution to this. You see in cities, and you've seen these videos, I know you guys have seen these videos on Twitter, where police officers have decided to march in solidarity with the protesters. And this kind of olive branch, this compromise, has been more successful in reducing violence than any crackdown that I have seen so far. Because when the people believe that the police are on their side, whether they really are or not, just a different story, they're way less likely to be violent. And I think that's what you're going to need at a more federal level. We're going to need to see federal and state governments really reevaluating the systems that they have in place. And I mean their entire systems, everything from police enforcement to, again, as we discussed, how jury trials work, to police accountability, to police union power, to who reviews it, to who punishes it, to licensing, and just everything from top down is going to need to be examined. And I am not an expert on this, okay? Knowing local and federal laws is not my number one skill set. I can't pretend to expert and know exactly what to do, but I do know that we're going to have to take some of these fundamental systems that have been unchanged for decades and really take a minute to look at them and identify the parts that aren't working. And then as a society, as us as citizens, we're going to have to listen to ideas that are proposed to us by governors, by representatives, by think tanks and smart people, and try to find the best solutions to improve our systems, all the things that I've criticized today. And I have such a vague solution to this. Yeah, do you know what solution we need? More improvements. What kind of improvements? That's going to be complicated. And the reality of the thing is that it is going to be complicated. This isn't going to be an issue that you just pass one law and everything fixes. You're going to have major overhauls. God, I've rambled today. But I made this video because I felt that some of these things were important to say. I feel like in the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of people see it only as we hate white people. And there's a streak of that in that movement. There really is. And it makes me sad to see. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't support that in any capacity for, well, obvious reasons. But the majority of the movement is about getting people to actually think that Black lives legitimately do matter, because the Black community doesn't have that experience right now. George Floyd was murdered. Police largely not accountable until there were riots, because the systems that are in place do not hold them accountable to crimes even remotely similarly to the rest of us. So we have a major fundamental issue in the country with police accountability and the way jury trials are skewed in favor of police. Violent protests are bad. I don't support them, never will. They're not unsurprising because of the massive unemployment and systematic oppression and coronavirus and crazy stuff that's been happening. I don't think that responding to this with more violence and more crackdowns is going to work. I think it's going to be extremely counterproductive. Though I honestly expect the response to be more violence, and I think it's just going to continue to get worse until something burns. It's like a Capitol building or something crazy like that burns to the ground. And the solution is to really stop and try to make peace to meet with leaders of various groups, to start the ball rolling on change, to be willing to evaluate fundamental systems and beliefs and change those. And I don't know how many people are willing to do that, but I think that's the way to go. And that's all for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.